So when you look at who's establishing in America what is usual, normal, or expected, like who owns the media, who owns higher education, who owns Hollywood and entertainment, the public education system, primary school, social services. When you own all of that messaging, you are the one who can determine what is ordinary, what is usual or expected. And when somebody like CCV or Baer or whoever it may be comes and you start to push against that, they go nuts.
And welcome back to The Narrative. Back with you is Center for Christian Virtue President Baer, here with my co-host David Mahan, and excited to be back with both of our listeners now that I missed last week's episode, and the rest of them are run off because David just tanked the show. But David, thank you for
it was great.
Thank you for carrying the water for us last week, and appreciate. I'll say my family and I had some really restful and good time away, and but missed the CCV team, and feel grateful to get to do this work.
Everybody prayed for Maria and all that she must have endured.
We went down to St. Augustine, Florida, where it's a 13-hour drive with a 6 and a 3-year-old. And they were champs, man. They were great, and we had just a great time and recharge and all that. But missed you guys, and while we were away, it's regular that CCV is in the press. It's not normal that the New Yorker covers CCV and calls us things like, incredibly influential and powerful and terrifying and all those things. And then it's not also normal that not only does the New Yorker do that, but then The Nation, one of the other most liberal progressive publications in the nation, went after us too. And it's been about 72 hours. Last time I tried to go away on vacation, Crossroads canceled us and David, and this time I try to go on vacation and the New Yorker comes after us. I think the lesson is I can't leave for vacation here. But we're taking this is actually supposed to be the wrap-up episode of our volume on woke capitalism. But my goodness, this 8,000 word disaster of a story. And again, most of it's not about CCV. Most of it's just about Ohio politics and redistricting and the downfall of democracy, according to the New Yorker. And there's so much nonsense in this story that I felt like we need to just take a brief pause and kind of unpack it, because this is the epitome of what this pod is about, of the narrative, right? Which is, there is the narrative that the media pushes, that academia pushes, that corporate America pushes, and then there's the truth. And there's so much like misinformation. It's literally just flood the zone with misinformation and falsehoods and misleading statements, and unsupported claims, that you do it so much that you can't, that your average person just can't unpack it all. Right. But that's why we have a podcast and we have unlimited tape on this thing. And we can actually unpack it. And I will say, Dave, one of my favorite parts of you coming to CCV is not getting to see how God has used you to inspire churches. It's not seeing how God has used you to reach across the aisle and build relationships and share the gospel with people that otherwise wouldn't talk to CCV. It's watching you get completely scorched by the press too and get so frustrated by it. And seeing your experience with the media as well. And I know you've got some thoughts on all that.
Yeah, I get to get beat up too. That's right.
Yeah.
You ain't the only one around here anymore. But it was inspiring. First of all, there was a couple things you said I'll bring up later on the podcast that were truly inspiring. And I say that, no joke. But what was frustrating was to see how they would use words like radical and extreme. And but they are just, the question is, who's defining the norms? Right. Like who defines what is extreme? Extreme is exceeding the ordinary, usual, or expected.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at who's establishing in America what is usual, normal, or expected, like who owns the media, who owns higher education, who owns Hollywood and entertainment, the public education system, primary school, social services. When you own all of that messaging, you are the one who can determine what is ordinary, what is usual or expected. And when somebody like CCV or Aaron Baer or whoever it may be comes and you start to push against that, they go nuts. And now we become extremists.
Oh yeah, no, that honestly, Dave, that like right out of the gate. And again, the way they do it, the way that Jane Mayer, who wrote this story, wrote it, is just the assumptions that she makes. And of course, everyone's here. And it's just hilarious. Like right out of the gate, they talk about how crazy radical, like Ohio used to not be this radical. It used to be a moderate state, and now it's really radical. And just look, it's not just what they've done on issues like abortion, but also issues like transgender rights. They've gone so far out of, and it's like, wait a minute, they want you to just completely forget the past and act like, 10 years ago, if somebody would have asked you what your preferred pronoun was, they wouldn't know what the heck you're talking about. Right. Or 10 years ago in Ohio, 5 years ago. Yeah.
5 years ago.
If you would have gone to Ted Strickland, that's the first interview they do, is they talk with former one-term Democratic governor of Ohio, Ted Strickland. And they say, oh, Ted, how has Ohio gone so radical? But if you would have gone to Ted when he was governor of Ohio and said, hey, we want to pass a law to say that girls have to be competing against boys in girl sports, or it's okay to pump 8-year-olds full of puberty blocking drugs and cross-sex hormones and give 16.
On that point, Aaron, like I have done this. I have gone on Ohio Channel. I would be watching maybe a hearing on a pro-life bill or something like that, where they'll say parenting person instead of mother, or neonate instead of baby. I literally have wasted your money to spend time to go back in history just a year to listen to those same representatives, those same members, and they would use the word mother. Right. They would use the word baby, but not anymore. So when you say 10 years ago, no, a year ago. Right. The stuff that they call extreme was normal.
Right. It's just, and again, this is just something that everyone has seen. You look at CCV's positions since 1983, our positions have not changed. Now, I will say we have positions today that we didn't realize were issue positions 40 years ago. We didn't realize it was an issue position to say boys are boys and girls are girls and men can't get pregnant. Apparently that now needs to be said.
Right.
But the idea that we've somehow shifted so far right, or even that culture has shifted so far right? Like Planned Parenthood back in 2012, their big campaign was Stop the War on Women, but they don't run that campaign anymore because they can't say what a woman is, and men can get pregnant too in their eyes.
Right. The left has shifted so far left that the margins on the right become extreme. Exactly. Like we weren't margined before.
Yeah, no, and the reality is, it's not that Ohio has moved so far right. It's that the left has moved so far left.
That's right. Yep.
And everybody else is saying, how do we stop that? That's crazy. This is insane. That just from jump, that was the first thing to me when I was reading this thing, that the assumption that somehow we've gone so radical is just it's ignoring reality.
I do want to get into, they talked a lot about gerrymandering in here as if Republicans own that, and it's never been done before. But the one thing that was most inspiring, and I will probably never say this again in regards to something you have done or said, but you said, we are going to have a voice in the direction of the state and nation, God willing. And you were talking about, this was in reference to the building. Yeah. There has, when I look at the media and how they twist what I say and things like that, sometimes I ask myself, why do you care about little CCV? Why do you care about what Dave said, during a hearing or something like that? And it's because of who we represent. You said that we will have a voice, God willing, right? And I think that terrifies them because they own all of these other institutions, but not the church. They have infiltrated the church. They have clearly stated over decades that they have to infiltrate the church, especially when it comes to abortion and look at like how it impacts the African-American community. They clearly just said we have to impact these believers. We have to get pastors and social services to influence, these churches. And so when you said that in reference to the building, right, you said that building was sending a signal. I'm telling you, man, I could preach off of just those couple sentences. But what did you mean by that? That building somehow across from the State House would send a signal?
Yeah, and there, I appreciate that, Dave. And there's a few things that I meant by that in particular. I think one, more than anything right now, and this actually ties to the conversation we just had. As you said, the left progressivism has overtaken the power institutions in America, academia, media, corporate America, social services, as you've said, HR departments. Again, this is, if you don't believe this, then you're ignoring reality, right? But the reality is that most people aren't where they are yet, right? Most people in the country don't think it's right for boys to compete in girls' sports, right? Don't think it's right that America is fundamentally and systematically racist from the ground up and irredeemably so, right? They do agree that America has committed some horrific racial sins in our past and in our present, but not that it's irredeemable and one of the worst places to be, right? There's things like that just most people don't buy into, and for us at CCV right now, and this has been the big push for us, is really, as much as we need anything, first and foremost, we need a movement of the Holy Spirit. We need people to turn to Jesus Christ. That's the only hope for the nation, and we want to proclaim that at every moment. But the other thing we need is just courage. We just need the body of Christ to be willing to speak up and just say the common sense thing, right? That was actually, I had one lobbyist text me afterwards. And he was joking about how the both this piece and the nation piece made it sound like we're so terrifying and so threatening and so and it's like I've never walked into a meeting with a lawmaker and yelled at them before. I've never walked into a meeting with a lawmaker and threatened them before. And
Aaron,
not even
in your Bible, when the prophet speaks, it was terrifying because of who that prophet represented. And I'm not calling you a prophet. I'm just saying that we are bearing the word of the Lord in relation to public policy, right? And so they admit in this article, when we come in, there was a representative that said, when we come to the State House, people know we're there.
Right. And what's funny about it, and honestly, Dave, I remember when we were bringing you on, I said, Dave, I want you to be our policy director. And he said, I've never lobbied in a day of my life. I said, Dave, you don't need to know how to be a smooth talking lobbyist and all that. Just be you. And who you are is a man of God and who will just speak things plainly. I mean, I had a meeting just yesterday with a lawmaker, and it was, all we do is get in and say, hey, it's wrong to inject kids with cross-sex hormones. Yeah. This, and we're going to keep talking about it. And we're going to talk to other members about that. The secret of the sauce of CCV is we're there and we talk the truth. Yeah. And that's it. We and by all means, we tell the voters, I don't want to act like we don't try to educate voters and motivate them and all that. We do a lot of grassroots organizing, but even all that is we just tell them what the people down here are doing.
Yeah. The ability of the media and the left, because they control all these institutions, to define reality is mind-blowing to me. There was one thing that that Peppers guy, I guess he used to be the chairman of the Democratic, the party. He had a quote in here that he has watched the reputation of Ohio's public school system slide as Republicans siphon off public funding. Okay, now if that is not a reshaping of reality, if I want everybody listening to this podcast, go to U.S. News and World Report, And I want you just to type in Columbus City School District. If you do that, what you will find is some graphs. And on those graphs, one of which says they received $19,253 per student in the Columbus City School District. And for that investment of tax dollars, it says, if you look under the test score for proficiency in math, 36% of elementary school students in that district are proficient in math. 30% of middle schoolers and only 17% of high schoolers are proficient in math. If you bump over to reading, 40% of elementary school students proficient, 34% of middle school students proficient in reading, and 39% of high school students proficient in reading. It is not, listen, the reality is not that Republicans are controlling somehow the reputation of the schools. They have a reputation of their own that they've established over 60 years of failure.
And the thing with that, Dave, I've been using this more and more because we actually just 2 nights ago, we launched our first school in a church at CCV, and we had 30 awesome kids up on stage that have been, and I don't say this lightly, have been saved from Columbus public schools.
I cried like a baby.
And not just the academic failures, but the moral failures, everything, the safety issues at those schools. Those kids have been given a better chance at success because the church has stepped up there. And Lord willing, we're going to start hundreds of these schools all over the state and nation. But the thing about Columbus Public, and we had one pastor get up and tell the story of children who have been failed time and time again by the Columbus City School District, which again, if you think Columbus City Schools is especially bad, especially for a city like an inner city schools, it's not. It's the same as basically every inner city school district. Dave, you've been all over the country.
Yes.
Yeah. It's every inner city school district. And the reality is, though, with Columbus Public, and actually the number is higher than $20,000 per kid we spend, but let's just use that as the baseline. By the time a kid graduates Columbus City Schools, we have invested as taxpayers $260,000 into their education. $260,000 per kid, per pupil. Every single one of those 50,000 kids in Columbus Public, we've spent $260,000 on their education, and many of these kids can't read.
How much does it cost to teach a third grader how to read? I mean,
by the time, just do that easy math. By the time a third grader has graduated third grade, we've spent $80,000 on their education, and they can't read. Just that alone is like, well, this is just a broken system, right? We could get into everything that's a bad ROI right there. We should be able to do better than that on that one kid's education. And now, mind you, we're pooling all those kids together, and we still can't teach them to read. And that's just, again, that's just a spin by David Pepper. And this is a good time to get into David Pepper real quick. And I'll just say, the absolute love affair that this article had with David Pepper and his boyish and preppy charm was very cute. But the idea that the guy that took over the Ohio Democratic Party in 2015 and lost every statewide race in the state of Ohio, if for every candidate not named Sherrod Brown, is an absolute joke. It is. He is no longer the chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party because he ran that thing into the ground, and he led that party so far left, so far out of the mainstream. Again, pushing things like abortion on demand up to the point of birth. They want to say Ohio is not a pro-life state. I will guarantee you Ohio is not a state that wants abortion on demand up to the point of birth. That David Pepper believes in. I guarantee you Ohio doesn't want boys and girls sports. It's absolutely hilarious to me. And I'll get into we need to have the redistricting conversation in a minute. By all means, David Pepper, exercise your American rights to get out there and say your piece. But to mark David Pepper in Ohio politics as anything but a failure is just an inaccurate statement of fact of what he's done in the state. He lost every statewide race. He ran the Democratic Party into the ground, led them so far left that there's not a pro-life Democrat in the House in the General Assembly anymore. There used to be. There's not anymore. And there's a reason why, people like Tim Ryan, were losing their congressional seats. Tim Ryan 8 years ago was winning his congressional district by 30 points. He won his last reelect by 7 points. And if he had run one more time there, he was going to lose. And it's because the party has been led so far to the left.
Yeah, there was, when I first came here, Aaron, there was, and again, I'm talking and speaking more to the framework of this piece. The redefining terms, what labeling of what is extreme or not, what is ordinary or not. They were talking about Representative Liston saying that women weren't going to be able to get ordinary care and that women would die. And I'm like, well, if ordinary care is the killing of a baby 100% of the time in an abortion procedure, I mean, just how they twist the words. And if you're not paying attention, it'd be like, man, those guys are jerks over there. But one of the things that is said, I don't know if people understood, because I didn't completely understand how polling is used, right? They'll say things like, 14% of Ohioans support the banning of all abortions. And, somebody would read a poll like that and be like, oh, man, I had no idea that my views were so extreme. Like, what role does polling play? Because they mentioned polling a lot in this piece here.
Oh, yeah, no, that's I'm looking for it right. And I actually, it's funny, in the interview, when I interviewed with Jane Mayer for this piece, we talked a decent amount of polling. She included one of my quotes on polling in there. And
you said the only polls that matter are polls of folks turning out to vote. I'm telling you, you have some bangers in this one. I'm like, okay.
Well, and what's really funny about this is she tries to dismiss all of this. Well, it's because it's so gerrymandered. So I'll just say there, if you want to talk about gerrymandering, that you got to start your accusations of gerrymandering for the passage, for the enactment of the heartbeat bill, and the enactment of things like the Med Act and the expansion of school choice and all these things. If you're upset about the enactment of these laws, you are fundamentally accusing the writers and founders of the Northwest Territory Ordinance in 1788 of gerrymandering, because these things are signed by statewide candidates, not by individual lawmakers from randomly drawn districts. These are, what I said to Jane on this thing was, listen, if Ohio was not a pro-life state, let's flash back to 2018, right? The heartbeat bill had been moving for 8 years at this point. It was vetoed the year before by Governor Kasich. It was getting ready to be sent back to Kasich. At all three debates between Richard Cordray and Mike DeWine, the heartbeat bill was one of the lead arguments talked about of what are you going to do with the heartbeat bill? Richard Cordray, the Democrat, said he would veto it. Mike DeWine, the Republican, said he would sign it. It was the headline. You go look at the Dispatch headlines. The headlines, the Cordray DeWine disagree on abortion and guns. That was the headlines of these things.
Yeah.
And what happened? Mike DeWine won. But let's not just talk about Mike DeWine. Mike DeWine's a well-known name in Ohio. He's got an advantage built in. Let's look at the other 5 statewide offices. You had Dave Yost running for Attorney General. Keith Faber running for Auditor. Frank LaRose running for Secretary of State. And Robert Sprague running for Treasurer. 3 of those guys, Keith Faber, Frank LaRose, Robert Sprague, all personally voted for the heartbeat bill in the General Assembly. Dave Yost pledged he would defend the heartbeat bill in court running for office. The idea that Ohio is not a pro-life state and our district lines are drawn so out of whack that pro-lifers are just able to take over Ohio is just stupid. There's no other way around it, Dave. It's just stupid. And this ties into that polling question, right? Because polling in Ohio, I went and looked this up because polling in Ohio has been woefully terrible over the last few years. So much so that, there was, I remember in 2018, there was this proposition issue one that was going to decriminalize drug possession. And the Cleveland Plain Dealer had a deal with Baldwin Wallace for their polling for that election. And they were just, every time Baldwin Wallace would run a poll, the Cleveland Plain Dealer would run a story on it. And they were saying that the issue one was going to pass by 30 points. It just massive. It'd be huge. Issue one went down 66 to 33. It went down 2-1. And so much so to the report that I called one of the reporters afterwards, and he said, yeah, we're not going to use their polls anymore because it has been so out of line. Now, but let's talk specifically about Quinnipiac. I went and pulled this up. I got to find where I wrote this down because this is an 8,000 word story and it's pretty robust. So they talked about how the Quinnipiac polls have that abortion bans are very unpopular in Ohio. Well, let's look at Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac in 2020 polled the presidential race, their last poll before Biden and Trump ran against each other. And they had Biden winning 48-43 in their poll. Trump won by 8 points. They were off 13 points in their poll. Mm-hmm. And there's no accountability for him, Dave. And again, I'm not saying there needs to be. The accountability needs to be people just stop listening to the polls, and ideally responsible journalists stop quoting their polls because they're just wrong.
At what point is it not just revealing truth, but shaping reality, right? So it seems like with so many of these polls, that's what they're doing.
Yep.
But the perception is that they're reporting some sort of reality. They're trying to shape reality.
No, that Dave, that's exact. I mean, you look at how they're using these polls, this Quinnipiac poll here. It very much is they use it as a bludgeon, saying, look, you're so far out of step. It's not even a moral argument they're making, right? They're trying to make an argument saying, because other people don't want this, you shouldn't do it, as opposed to what's the right thing here, which is where we always go back to. But the baseline of it is it's just not true. To your point, Dave, I remember, folks know I used to work in Arizona, and there was, I'm going to get these numbers off, but you can go look them up in particular. 2020, when Martha McSally was running against Kyrsten Sinema again for Senate, and polls had Kyrsten winning by something like 17 points, right? She ended up winning by single digits, like 5 or 6. It was still a good win, but single digits. And I remember a friend of mine who was working on the Martha McSally campaign said those polls cost them millions of dollars in donations, because what the line started becoming is Martha can't win. We just need to give up on Arizona and go elsewhere. And that's the effect that people like this want to have with their polling is because they can't win the argument, because they don't want to look at a picture of an ultrasound and say that's not a baby and it's morally wrong to kill a baby. They want to use bully tactics like polling.
Yeah, it's like it's almost, to the average person, it's almost like I don't have to do the research to know the truth if this is what everybody says is normal.
Yeah.
Right. If the easy way out is normal, I don't even have to do the research. I was with a pastor friend this morning, and we were talking about our Rise Up tour that's coming up here this fall, and we've got the voter guides coming out for everybody. By the way, you can pre-order those voter guides now. But the Lord has put some words on our heart in terms of rise up, and there's a passage that the Lord's put on my heart that says, if the foundations be destroyed, what will the righteous do? And I've read that for years, and I looked at that in the context of family being the foundation. But really, when you look at that word foundation, it means social order. Social order, those that legislate, the military, law enforcement, the judicial system, and the family and the church, all these represent social order. And one of the judgments for God, when folks wanted to act like knuckleheads, his people, he would remove both supply and support. What does that mean? He would remove the godly voice, the godly wisdom, the godly understanding, the godly courage, the godly leadership necessary to maintain the social order. And reading this article, man, and it was a book. I mean, we got to order some more paper, Robin, because I printed off 3 reams of paper. But it was interesting for them to actually say that one of the most, out of all these issues, is those daggone Christians,
right,
getting in the way of them destroying the social order.
Yeah.
And I want to answer that question for us today. And that's, if the foundations be destroyed, what will the righteous do? We'll do what we are talking about. We will speak, right? Yeah. We will declare the truth, and we will make sure that we have a voice in what goes on over at that state house that controls what happens in this state, but also the bellwether for the nation.
Yeah.
What will the righteous do? We will speak. We will lead. And I'm so proud that we were featured in this hit piece.
No, honestly, Dave, that's the way I've sort of wrapped my mind around this afterwards, because this is, I'm not gonna ever lie, like that it feels good when stuff like this comes out and all that, but it is at the same time to be worthy of something like this, I guess, is. And I pray it's for Jesus' name, and that's when you talked about the building, like that's it. Like are we going to be able to stop the onslaught that's coming? I don't know. We can't. God can.
That's right.
But what we are called to with this building, with this work, with all the things God's calling us to do right now, whether it's planting schools or starting Christian chambers or everything else, passing the backpack bill, it's we know we can stand, and I think the important part is God willing is that it's we want to be wholly submitted to him, and recognize that whatever happens, he is still God. And that's, to your point, Dave, that's the one thing they can corrupt the church. They can overtake the media. They can castrate children, and they can murder babies, and all these types of things, but they can't dethrone God.
That's right.
And I think for us, and this is what we talk about every day here, when we put our hope in anything other than that is when we falter.
Yeah.
And this is just the reminder here. Yeah. I had just a few other things, Dave. I know we're running out of time here that I just wanted to hit, and I don't know what else. If you got,
I'm getting ready to preach, man. It's about to be crowd.
So a handful of very quick things that I need to touch base on. First and foremost, this whole conversation about Red Map. Dave, I don't know about you, but when I saw Red Map, I said, Red Map. And I said, because I had no idea what Red Map is. like she said, we found Red Map, and we're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I googled the movie trailer.
But she talked, and maybe Red Map is a big deal. We don't do it. We track the redistricting process. We don't get involved in redistricting in many ways, but the funny thing to me though was she talked about all this like conservative plot to overtake and Red Map is like the Republican effort to impact redistricting. Nowhere in this story mentions that in about 2010, the Attorney General of the United States of America, a man by the name of Eric Holder, resigned one of the most prestigious positions in the country to take over the Democrat effort for redistricting in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And hear me out when I say this. There is nothing legally or even, I would say, morally wrong about it. I'm not criticizing him for doing that, right? He is an American that believes in this and wants to impact the process. Go get him, man. That's what this whole thing is built on. Good for you. But he jumped in and took over a multi-million-dollar massive organization to impact this all over the country. And that was the Cleveland Plain Dealer did a story on the story. The reporter called me and was asking me about this. And he said, do you have any other things to say? I said, yeah, just one more thing. I want to talk about this. Like, for her to not mention all that was being done in this state by the Democrats to impact redistricting, and just the simple fact that they lost. Like, you had two sides fighting to draw the lines, and one side is going to win, one side's going to lose. And the Democrats lost, not because the Republicans were so big, mean, and awful, but they just won. Yeah. And the reality was, I was joking with this reporter on the plane. I said, his name is Jeremy Pelzer. I said, Jeremy, you were in the redistricting hearings. There was about 20 people in there. Most of those people all had the same t-shirts on. All of them had the same Fair Districts Now t-shirts on. I said, Jeremy, who paid for those t-shirts? Who paid for those fancy looking logos? Who paid for their signs? Who paid for their website? Who's paid for those 4 lawsuits that they filed to redo Ohio's redistricting lines and paid for them in states all over the country? It's Eric Holder. And again, that's your freedom as an American. Go get him, guy. No knock, no nothing. But to act like that Republicans are the only ones doing this and the only ones putting quote unquote dark money into this and all this kind of stuff. No, you know, both sides do it. You could be
Eric Holder clearly said that he was Obama's wingman.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean,
it just is what it. And again, this is just the half truth of these things, right? Is Red Map real? I'm sure it is. Again, genuinely never heard of it, but is it alone in what it does? And are not both sides? And again, what cracked me up at the very beginning is when they said Ohio's passing laws that could never pass through Congress. Yeah, that's how states work. New York and California are passing laws right now that could never pass through Congress. That's not a sign of radicalism. That's a sign of federalism. That's how these things work.
Yeah. I think this is what frustrates the average person. This is politics, right? You know what I mean? And I don't think, very few people understand politics to this degree. So this kind of, some of it goes in one ear and out the other. And I think really it just kind of entrenches, thought processes and belief systems that people already have, right? But it's not that folks really understand gerrymandering or red map or whatever. But I think for the average believer, what we need to know is we don't need to understand politics. We need to understand the word of God. We need to understand the basics of what it means to be human in 2022. And we need to give ourselves, we need to encourage ourselves to be that voice, to speak up. Because really the reason why we don't is, number one, lack of knowledge. But number two, we're just afraid.
Yep.
We're afraid because we don't understand all the politics. And I'm telling you, family, that's me. I'm going to admit, I don't get all the politics. It frustrates me. The game here frustrates me.
Yeah.
But I have seen, and this is what I'll be sharing during the tour. I have seen the hand of God move upon truth, whether it be me testifying or Nalani testifying or John or Troy testifying. I've heard representatives and senators both tell me that so-and-so will never listen to you, Dave. Don't even try. And that was my next call. And guess who I'm testifying in front of? Yeah. I'm seeing this. And I know most of you don't get to see this. But listen, it's not just CCV that they're afraid of down here. It's not just CCV that everybody knows about here. We exist to amplify your voice.
That's right.
Help us help you, help them down here at the State House.
Yeah, no, but honestly, Dave, I was talking with a friend about this just 2 days ago. I said that, there's 3 things that move bills, policy in politics in Ohio and every state. It's money, ideas, and people. We don't play the money game, right? We don't make political donations. I've made one political donation in my life, and that was to my friend in Arizona when I was living out there that was running for the State House. And we don't do that, right? And honestly, we couldn't keep up if we tried. But we try to bring the best ideas supported by the best social science and medical data and legal arguments and all those and personal stories. But then we try to move people. And that's the thing that people can't get around down here is our job is to motivate people. And honestly, the other side of the story is why I don't really care so much about what the New Yorker writes ultimately. is because it's called the New Yorker, and I live in Ohio. And so it doesn't surprise me that something called the New Yorker doesn't find my views very, very friendly. But also too, quite honestly, we got more reach than the New Yorkers got here. Ruth Edmonds is out there right now connecting with people, talking about this work, right? Troy and Corinne, our staff is out there meeting with people, bringing them in. That's why we do this Rise Up tour, because when we can bring people together, that's why we're doing the March for Life on October 5th. When we can bring people together, they can't ignore us. And that's more powerful than any amount of money they can throw around.
That's right.
Dave, you got anything else? We got to wrap up here. I have one more thing I wanted to say, but you got anything else before we wrap?
Go ahead.
This is important to me, because speaking of God's word, I do take it very seriously to honor thy mother and father. And I shared some of my testimony with Jane Mayer in the call, and then I even talked to the fact checker afterwards, and I specified this, and they didn't get it right. And the way this story is written is dishonoring to my mom and dad, where they said that I had a rocky adolescence. I need to make something very clear. I had a blessed childhood. I had great parents that took care of me, that gave me great opportunities, that loved me, made sure I went to school, that made sure I got to go to camps and went on vacations and all that. We weren't a wealthy family by any stretch of by any stretch of the imagination, but we always had everything that we needed. And I feel very blessed to have the family that I have.
That's right.
When I was in high school, I had a rebellious phase. That's where I got into my trouble, right? That's why they said I had a rocky adolescence in here, is they're referring to when, my testimony that I shared, that I got into trouble as a kid, got arrested, had to go to court, those types of things. And it was a church that came and shared the gospel with me and loved me and turned my life around. And it's why I'm very grateful for it. But it is very important that I say that and say that that is, there's a lot of factually wrong things in here. That to me is the most offensive, because it's dishonoring to my mom and dad, who I love dearly, and who did do everything they could for me and gave me so many great opportunities. And I feel forever grateful for them and love them, and they love my kids. And so that part is of everything that's written in this story, that's the part that's most offensive to me. And I want to make that clear as we talk about these things. So yeah, with that being said, we're gonna wrap this episode. And grateful to there's so much more. Honestly, it's 8,000 words. I got so many other notes here, but you can go read this nonsense if you want. But in all sincerity, I say this too, and this is a reminder for us. Let's pray for the New Yorker, and pray for Jane Mayer, and pray for David Pepper. And we can call their ideas dumb and their writing harmful, and all those types of things. And we will, especially because they're hurting people with the things that they write and the things that they say. But we do ultimately, we care for them as much as we care for anybody, and want to see them know the Lord. And we're going to continue to talk about what we're doing, and we'll talk with people that disagree with us about it. But we're going to wrap here on this sort of special breakout episode of The Narrative. We're going to be back next week for the wrap up episode on woke capitalism, and all that goes into that. I got to tell you too, maybe we're going to do an email poll out here for what should we do the next season on. I got to tell you, I'm kind of thinking we do the next season on the media itself, and talk about what's happened with the media, that this is now understood as journalism. Or maybe we go another direction, if maybe you got ideas out there. So we want to hear from you. Again, if you enjoy the pod, please do go leave us a review. Leave us a rating. We love that helps us reach more people. If you've enjoyed the podcast, your notes of encouragement mean a lot. We met one of our other listeners just the other day at the launch of the micro school. So appreciate when you send that encouragement to us. And we'll be back next time here on The Narrative.